we want to make sure that we are offering some light and some hope and something to really help people to move forward. And so today I am joined by licensed clinical social worker Nia Ridgle and licensed clinical social worker Stephanie Jones. Nia, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Nia Ridgle. It's like a Pringle, but with the R. So Ridgle. I know is listen. That's like I have to tell people that. I should have told you that. I'm sorry about that. But it's Nia Ridgle. It's okay. My name is Nia Ridgle. I'm a licensed clinical therapist. I live and work in Silicon Valley. It's San Jose, California, to be exact. I work in at the virtual fit team for Kaiser Permanente, in addition to I have my own private practice in the area virtual consulting.
And Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Jones. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. I am based out of the Jacksonville, Florida area. And so I am the owner of Lifestyle Management Counseling. And there I offer individuals, couples, and family counseling services. In addition to that, we also have a women's empowerment initiative entitled Women at Work. So I'm looking forward to our conversation and all things that we can offer as far as resources.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I'm just so grateful that you both have taken the time out to spend a little bit of time on this Saturday. There has been a lot happening. First, we had the conversation around COVID-19. Then we talked about quarantine. Then we get to this past week. And it's been heavy. It's been really heavy with the murder of George Floyd, with the riots. People just are kind of out of sorts and not really sure how to deal with their emotions. And so I wanted to open up with, I had shared with the ladies that I've been reading this book. It is called The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. And in this book, Dr. Walker talks about the mental health through the history of African Americans. And there's a passage really in the beginning that I think speaks so much to what's happening right now. And I think it really set the tone for what we're dealing with and how to proceed in this conversation. And so she starts by saying, instead of paying attention to our feelings of anxiety or depression or the signs of distress, you press forward. You remind yourself that Black people persevere. Even in the midst of a society of racial terrorism, you continue on using your ancestral gifts. Perhaps you have Maya Angelou's poem, Still I Rise, memorized to remind you of the reality that Black people have despised, in part because we seem to have thrived no matter what. We tap into something special that has cultivated for generations. When our ancestors struggled to live to the next day, endure inhumane treatment, and maybe, just maybe, be themselves without consequences, there was no time for emotional problems. And I think it really sets the tone for a lot of what's happening because we push through. We push through so much of the pain. We push through so much of what we're dealing with. And I think that leads us to the point of where we are right now. So also I want to let you all know that you can leave your comments in the box. We'll have Q&A. And we'll make sure to monitor the chat box so we can answer some of your questions. But I just want to really make sure that we go ahead and jump into the discussion. So ladies, let me know your thoughts really on, what this week has been like for you.
Oh man, I think that, even just listening to the passage, you're right. Like, we've always been a culture that's built on endurance and pushing through, seeing it through, and that's the thing that's always been our strength. But that's also been something that has made us vulnerable because we don't talk about a lot of what's going on with us. We keep it to ourselves, and we've been doing a lot better. I have to say that there have been some great strides with just folks being a lot more honest about feelings and emotions and things that they're going through. But I would say specifically for me, it definitely has brought so much home, and not only just being a woman of color, but and being in a relationship with a Black man and having a Black son, that you look at your child and you're like, oh my God, he's so sweet, he's so innocent, and he's so smart, and he's so great, and you see all of these wonderful things about your child. And to think that someone else could look at your child and see them as a threat, you know. And I've experienced, even just in this small window, with this week, exchanges with law enforcement that I just, even just during this week, you know. So I've been in this space of really trying to wrap my mind around what's going on. So there's a lot of conflict, I'd say, for me personally.
Yeah, same for me too. So I'm in a sticky situation about this, about the whole COVID-19, and then the quarantine, and then the mental health focus around that, and then now this incident happens where we lose a brother, really, a tribal member on a public platform for not just Black people to witness, but for the whole country to witness. And so not only are we having to grieve, you know, nationally, internationally, right? But also, you know, it triggers in me, you know, being in fourth grade and learning about the negative aspects of Jim Crow and the civil rights movement and things like that, and being that little girl who said, if I was back then and I was there, I would have been that. I would have did that, right? So to be at this place and then be mentally back in that classroom and really check in with my integrity as a person and say, when you were that little girl in fourth grade and you had said, and you had like so much, you were fearless around what you were going to do if you were in that place, you're here now. So what now? So what are you going to do? Well, I'm not 10 no more. I'm a whole grown woman and I have things to lose. So I learned, like, just through, you know, my own journey, never to manifest things outwardly, but to look inwardly to see, like, you know, connect with my higher power and to get and seek wisdom. And so what my higher power told me was, get mad, but do what's necessary. Right. So I hold myself in that space where I am very angry. I'm hurt. I'm embarrassed, right? That this had to be my people, my brother, my tribal member. And I feel indifferent, right? So in that space of uncomfortableness, because I'm allowing myself to sit here. I question, okay, so then knowing what I know and going through what I've been through, what can I do? Right? As the mother of a 4-year-old young boy who looks at him and says, this is not going to happen to you. So I put myself in that situation, and God placed me in a position as a leader, because we're all mental health helpers in some capacity. We have to control over the mind, which is the most powerful weapon that we have as a Black people. But we also know, just through the book and just through society, that we have been neglected, abused, right? And we understand that the psychological factors that happen from that. So with me understanding that and having this place of privilege, that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming for everybody's mindset. Okay. I'm coming for everybody's consciousness. So, in a long story short, that's how I feel.
No, you touched on some really major things. And one of the things you touched on, I think is so important, is during this time, allowing yourself to feel however you're feeling. Mm-hmm. We get so caught up in cutting our feelings off and feeling like, I can't feel this way. You know, it's not acceptable. If you're angry, be angry. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're exhausted, it's okay. You can sit in that. I think the problem happens when we sit in it too long and then we don't know how to come up out of it. Right. That's where we get that. Or we have anger, and that's what results in the riots that are happening.
Right.
This anger, and people don't know what to do with it. You know, they're just angry and there's so much bottled up. And I think we have to get to the point of unbottling that, unpacking that, and being okay with saying, you know what, I'm not in a good space right now. You know, I know for myself, I didn't watch the video because I knew it was too much for me. And so I have seen, you know, different clips and have seen pictures and have read things, but I couldn't watch it. But I knew that about myself. And I think that it's important during this time to understand what triggers you. Because if you don't understand what triggers you, it's going to control you. And you have to really be mindful of that during this space. I do want to put a poll up just so people, and you can answer it at your own leisure, but just kind of just checking in and seeing how you're feeling, how you're doing right now. And if you're, like I said, if you're angry, although I'm looking at it and I've seen that I forgot to put angry on there, but
we need that one.
Right.
We need that one.
I was like, wait a minute, I didn't put anger on there. But if you're angry, put that in the comments. And so it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be exhausted. And I think I want to just talk a little bit about processing those feelings, because like I said before, we cut them off so often and we don't deal with them. I think part of it, we've kind of been conditioned to, girl, it's gonna be okay. Girl, you're not sad. You're fine. And we've kind of internalized what that feels like to cut emotions short. We do it with children. They fall down, you're not hurt. You're okay. Don't cry. And it's so important. Although it seems simple and small, that carries over into adulthood. And then you continue to do that. So I want to talk about that a little bit and just talk about being okay with just sitting in your feelings and being able to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things where it's culturally, right? Because like in the book, how they say, ain't nobody got time for feelings because we got work to be done. And I think that everything has its time and its place, right? And if we're taking that into perspective, then we have to really understand that we have foot soldiers on the floor right now that are marching and doing the foot ground work. And I think that that's necessary, right? But I also feel that, the strategy part behind it. So, in therapy, we talk about short-term, long, intermediate, and long-term goal. Okay, so the foot soldiers are the short-term goal. The intermediate goal is, okay, so we're going to be up for a fight. So what resources, what strategies are we putting in place to where, let's say these cops do get, their due diligence. What's the preventative of this and that not happening again, right? And then just that motion of not ignoring how we feel about that implementation part, right? And I think that has a lot to do with us just evading like instant gratification, and then we get self-soothed in that, and then we kind of just let it go, right? And I think that for me, that goes back to what you were saying about, well, that's ingrained in us, is to get instant responses to our emotional needs getting met, and then we forget about the impact.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I agree with all of that. All of it.
And I love the conversation about like naming your feelings, like, how are you feeling right now? So when my son was younger, I would say that to most, he would be described as a crybaby within the culture, right? Because, if something happened, if I asked him, what he did or what he was getting in trouble for, he would always respond, I don't know. And of course, for any parent, that can be very frustrating when you kind of want your children to start practicing resolving conflict and problem solving and understanding their emotions. But then I realized that I wasn't encouraging him to speak, about his emotions. And so rather than getting frustrated, then I would just kind of keep asking him to use your words, help me understand the feeling of what happened, So as he got a little bit older and I continued to stay patient, then he was able to say, well, I'm disappointed because math is my favorite subject and I didn't do very well. Or I'm angry because I made a mistake, or I'm disappointed because I hurt you, Mom, And so as he, fast forward, now he's 16 years old, the tears don't flow as easily, but he's very emotionally intelligent. And so being very proud of him being able to name and identify his feelings, because that translates well, especially during times right now where, you don't want to mislabel your feelings because you're not really able to really think about it and how you should.
Because we're so isolated right now. And I think that this happened at such a critical time because we have been in quarantine for the past 10, 11 weeks now. And so
72 days.
72 days. Exactly.
Longer for us.
But I think, right, in LA, I think that something also that is a major factor, and we mentioned this, in our discussion, that you have to really put this in context, that this is all happening during, someone died, someone was murdered in the middle of the street. People are protesting in the middle of the streets with masks on in the middle of a global pandemic. People are grieving the loss of freedom. And then at the same time, we're grieving the loss of a person. Yeah. All of this is happening when the world is already in an upside down. And I think it hurts even more because we were getting to it. We're still grieving all those things. People are working from home, travel plans have changed. We're getting into the summer months. People's weddings have changed. Birthing plans have changed. We were finally getting our mind wrapped around that, okay, this is the new normal. We were even feeling like, okay, we're kind of coming together a little bit. People are really feeling like,
looking out for each other.
We didn't value human connection. Like, let's get on this. We're kind of bonding a little bit more. And then out of nowhere, it just seems like an explosion happened. And that level of pain, I feel, is what is really equally dampening what's happening right now. And people weren't in a good headspace to begin with because of just being socially isolated for so long. But then you couple that on top of this, it's almost like, how do I deal with that? How do I deal with those emotions? How do I cope with that? When I was still trying to cope with being isolated at home, and dealing with all this other stuff of losing my job, of, not being able to, not knowing what the next step is going to be, when I'm going to be able to go back outside, all of those things, I think are so important to really identify during this time too.
Yeah, I think that, I think for me, I think that a lot of people, we experience life in different dimensions, right? So for COVID-19, some people, it's like, COVID-19 is like how I live my life anyway. I don't go nowhere, I don't do nothing, I got no job. So pretty much, I don't care. Some people it was catastrophic, right? Because it was like, I lost my job, I don't know what I'm gonna do, like all these other things. So I think that just taking this into context around just being in that survival mode brain, and then on top of that, I think the most, the thing that tipped the glass for everyone to be awakened to just how much we're not different than George being on the floor was that he didn't do anything. And we saw that, right? The other, Ahmaud, they said, don't run. Don't resist when people try to come up to you with guns, right? So I think over and over and over, our hand has been hit so many times for not even taking the cookie out the cookie jar. It comes to a point where it's like, well, this is abuse because you're finding stuff to kill me over. So I really want to highlight, we are in an abusive relationship with America. Okay, we are in an abusive relationship with our founding fathers. Okay, this is parental abuse, and that sometimes the child wants to leave the home.
Yep.
And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing people who have systematically, economically, mentally, emotionally, and physically to death been abused by its parents. We want to get out. People are temporarily going insane. That's what we're saying.
That's what's resulting in what's happening now.
Right.
People are not acting rationally. They don't know what to do. And when you don't know what to do, you do anything because you feel like your mind is like on overload. I mean, it's to your point, I completely agree with that. I mean, I saw this meme on Instagram and it really talked about just like different peaceful protests that have happened. Like, we did this. You all said, don't do that. We said, we did this. And, you said, don't kneel. You don't do this. And I think that after a while, when you have just gone in this, it's like a loop. When you're on this, you're in this cycle and you're on this hamster wheel for so long, it's like at some point you're like, you know what? I need to get off. I need to get off, whether I need to jump off, whether I need to, like, whatever it is, I got to get off of it. And people are in that space right now. And I really want to help people to get to a mindset to where, you know, you're understanding, one, what's triggering you, but really how to get yourself mentally stable around it. Because at the end of the day, whatever it is you decide to do, you know, there has to be there's like a next. Like there has to be a next. And you have to always, you know, always thinking about your own mental health too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes during these situations, it's so easy to get caught up in other people's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've given an example before, if I'm in a room of people who are just angry, I could have walked into the room and not been angry, but you're sitting and you're listening to everybody so angry, and after a while, you know what? She did try it. Like, she did try it. And so we have to really check ourselves and see where we are mentally, and what we have the capacity to deal with. Because although we're consuming all of this news and, you know, social media, it is taking a toll on everyone differently. Some people can consume it and be fine. Others can consume it and it take them to a completely different space.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be self-aware enough to know what is too much. Like, what is too much? So I think, Nia, can you give them the example you were talking about when we were talking about watching the video? I think that some people watched it when they shouldn't have watched it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they weren't ready,
Yeah, so I service clients from all different demographic age ranges and cultures, and I have older women who, you know, were back in the day where, you know, civil rights movement was actually an active thing. Like, she faced like discrimination when she went to school. She could only go into certain buildings because that was designated for the Black people, and so she had told me in session that she watched the video, and I just was like, you of all people shouldn't have watched that video, because when I watch it, it doesn't impact me how it impacts you. And she was like, yeah, it knocked me off. I was depressed. I couldn't move. I was angry. I was irritable because it touched an unhealed wound in her, right? Ours is post-secondary trauma. She experienced trauma on impact. So that's another thing, like what you were saying, people have to understand when you're watching these things, you're witnessing a murder. This is not a TV show. You know, this is not Law and Order. This is the actual real human being who a grown man said, mama. That's traumatic. I don't even allow my daughter to watch it. I personally don't ever want to see anyone get murdered. Like, that's what we're dealing with. And then we're dealing with the sociological and physically and mentally impact of people witnessing murder. And then for our president to then go and say, we can't mourn in our own way because we're thugs, but they can protest quarantine and be good people.
It's so and that's where you get the emotional overload. How do I process all of this? Because I think you put it in such a good context. You're not watching a TV show. Like, when you're watching these videos, and I think that social media desensitizes us a lot. It desensitizes us because we watch these things all the time. We scroll and you see it and you keep it moving. But we don't really understand the emotional and mental impact that it takes on you and the energy that it transfers to you. You are watching someone be murdered.
Yes.
And it's not the first time that we've watched this. And I think that is the trauma that we have not dealt with, because when you watch that, you said it perfectly. It taps into an unhealed part of you. And then you start going back to, you know, thinking about history and things that have happened. It transfers to you. Again, it's being self-aware. I know for me, if I watch, and this is all in full transparency, sometimes if I watch certain certain movies, I'm like, you know what, you probably shouldn't have watched that, because now you are thinking like your mindset is not where it needs to be. I remember when Harriet Tubman came out, and I went to the movie theater and I went and watched it, and I walked out like, I need a moment. Like, I need a moment. And I think that those are the things that we don't all of this is emotional trauma. You're being traumatized. And I think that the hurt and pain comes because you're thinking back to all of those things. It's been on a loop over and over and over again. I mean, who would think that we would be reliving things that we read in our history books? It seems so far removed from us that, like, oh, I'm glad I couldn't have dealt with that. And now we're dealing with it. Like, we are dealing with it in a different context. And I think that that's just so important for us to even recognize, because it's a lot. People are hurting. People are dealing with trauma and pain in a way that they're not even sure how to deal with it. And I think we have to really be conscious of that as we're moving forward, and as we're dealing with, riots, and we're looking at the people who are out there. People are hurting. I know there are people doing things that, everyone, whether you agree or don't agree with what's happening, the world is in chaos because people are hurting. When your child acts up at home and they start doing, it's an emotion, it's something that's not being met. Whether you want to give it to them or not, it's something that's not being met. And when you have an emotional need that's not being met, what do? You lash out until that need is met.
Right.
So, any thoughts? I know I see you over there, Stephanie. Like,
I'm like, listen. You see this? Like, I'm hearing a spiritual girl. You see me rocking over here back and forth. Let's have devotional in here in a minute. But no, both of you are absolutely right, because I'm quiet because I'm honestly just in full agreement with conversations about transparency, and I do genuinely feel like as we keep observing the content, it does become sensory overload, and it is a seed that's planted in it. Whether that seed grows immediately or it's something that's more long term, that it is something that we're going to have to deal with that. And I think that as we work on becoming more aware, then you start just kind of better understanding energy and like what things are good for you and what things aren't. If you're going through a breakup, as much as I love the Lord, sometimes I can't listen to gospel music because it just stimulates so many emotions I'm just not ready to deal with quite yet, and so just being mindful that thing makes a difference in how your day goes, a lot of times. And there are things that we just can't avoid about this situation. We can't avoid the fact that it's happening, but we can choose how we want to respond to what's happening. So I understand there's a place for, rebelling, and there's a place for protesting. There's also a place for this conversation. So everyone's going to take a different approach with how they want to confront what's going on. I know my personal opinion is that if anything is going to change, we have to get into those positions so that we can be able to kind of make decisions about what's happening that's impacting our people, and as much as some will say, well, voting doesn't matter, you still should do it anyway, because if there's anything that we can do to be a part of the change, be a part of the change, and if there's something that you can't, then we might have to go somewhere else.
Listen, I think that it's so important, because we all can impact change differently. We all have different levels of influence. We all are in different professions. We all take on different things. And I think it's important to identify, what is your pocket of change? Like, what is it that I can do as an individual? We can all sit here and consume everything that's on social media, that's on TV, and we can sit back at the end of the day and post and do a hashtag and, be mentally drained and exhausted just from what we're consuming. Or we can take that energy and those feelings and those emotions, and as we've kind of journeyed through them and we've gotten to the end, because the only way to get through something is to go, you have to go through it. I can't get over it unless I go through it. And so we have to feel those emotions all the way through. And when we get to that end of the point where I'm done being angry, I'm done being sad, now what do I do? And when I'm rationally thinking and I'm not emotionally thinking, what can I do? And that's how I knew that, I don't have any kind of political ties or anything like that. But what I do have is a voice, and what I do have a passion for is mental health. And this is my profession. And I do know other people in this profession who can use their voice to help people. I may not be able to, to do anything politically, but what I can do is help you to heal your mental health. I can help you to cope through a situation. And I think that we all have to really, like I said, after we're done with being angry, after we're done with being sad, figure out what can I do to get me to a better place of healing. Because you can't sit in it. When you sit in it too long and you get stuck, that's how we get into distress. When we're in distress because we're stuck in it and we can't get ourselves out. And the longer that you stay stuck in something, the harder it is to pull yourself out of it. And so I want to move to really giving people practical coping skills that they can use when they find themselves being angry, sad, trying to kind of move through this and navigate on a day-to-day. One of my favorite ones is just breathing, mindfulness breathing. And that's just really just focusing on your breath, bringing things back to your breath. I know it's hard to do when you're angry, when you're in the middle of something. It seems like it's something that you don't want to do. But if you really want to focus on calming yourself down, deep breathing really works. It works for me, breathing, having a focal point of your breath. The world is in chaos, but you can control your sensor. Just because the world is in chaos doesn't mean your behavior has to be chaotic, doesn't mean your thoughts have to be chaotic. And so really just focusing on that and being able to kind of push yourself through. What are some other coping skills that you can give to people?
I think you mentioned some really great ones to help with the somatic effects of emotionally being triggered. I want to also touch bases on the emotional, and we've been talking really heavily about the emotional, like when you're actually feeling the energy of emotions in your body and you're needing to like really get them out. I feel like specifically Black people, we're so impulsive about our emotions, right? About our feelings. And where I see this happening in the home where the parents don't really have a good emotional capacity to self-regulate is they're more picky on their kids or picky with the husbands, or just the overall mood and attitude is just, check in with that, and before you even lash out at someone or get upset, is it the person you're really upset at, or is it the situation that's triggering you, right? I think that people really need to be mindful of that because we still are in quarantine, right? And we're still having to go through this mourning and crisis in our home. So I really want to, ask the parents and the partners that if you're taking care of a loved one or you're the spouse of someone, to really check in with your moods, right? Before you react, just sit with yourself and really digest what you're experiencing, because we could be thinking we're doing something at a 5, but because we're not emotionally regulated, it's actually slashing out as a 10. And that's how we get incidents of child neglect and abuse and domestic violence. So people don't walk into those situations saying that I'm off to abuse my child and be a victim of domestic violence or abuse someone. So I want to have people check in with their emotions, and before they react, sit with themselves a little bit. Also, too, if you lost a loved one, that you have not mourned that death of that loved one, if you were a victim of some type of abusive relationship where you felt powerlessness, if you are currently in a relationship where you feel powerlessness, to really check in with yourself, because you could be feeling the effects of that times 10, and that's when suicidal thoughts come into play, because it's too much and it's overwhelming and it's affecting you on a whole nother personal level. So checking in with that. I think that when we look at these things in context, when you're operating from a healthy brain, you really don't understand how it affects people who are not in a healthy space, because these things are extremely traumatic on top of the trauma that they're already experiencing, right? So if you had some form of discrimination at the hands of a police officer, check in with yourself about that before you even go out and protest, because you could be triggered by a cop and do something emotionally. And people what they don't understand is when you don't control your emotions can control you.
Yep.
So you may go out there with all of the self-confidence to know that I'm just going to protest. and then you come across a cop and you already in this negative energy and you feeling some type of way, you could instantly just lash out in emotion and become a whole different person. So before you go out here and you want to be a revolutionary protester, check in with yourself and make sure that you are sound-minded body about being able to go out there, because like you said, if you can't handle everything that everybody else is handling, then it's going to affect you on a totally different level. So those are just some of the things. And then if you're a person who doesn't really believe in protesting or nonviolence, sign petitions, right? There's petitions you can sign. There's go pass off some waters to people who are out there. Just find little ways to where you're not feeling powerlessness in your situation. Really own your power in your position and not think that you have to be group minded and go out and do what everybody else is doing. Because we already got protesters out there, more power to them. I'm not going to be out here. But what I am going to do is I'm going to be right here talking to you ladies and whatever other platform I need to be on, staying and control your emotions and focus on your mental health. That's my gift to the world right now.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, to your point, Nia, and that moment happens so quickly where you can go from 0 to 100 with those emotions, because I experienced that yesterday. And as much as I can say as a provider and a helping professional, that I got it. Like, I know how my emotions work. Like, I know how to keep them under control. And I got pulled over yesterday. And so the way that the situation started was that I'm driving down the expressway and it's raining, right? And so then I noticed that law enforcement is behind me, and I'm cool. I'm like, okay, well, let's just see what's going on. Maybe he's gonna go around, but he doesn't. And so then he tries to drive in the opposite lane, and he's trying to communicate with me on the expressway. And this is going almost 80 miles an hour. So of course I'm flustered, like, what are you doing right now?
Yeah.
We're on the expressway. This makes no sense. So out of my initial frustration, I pull over because I want to figure out what's going on. But he doesn't pull over with me. He pulls forward and just stops. So then I'm like, okay, well, I guess everything is okay. I get back on the expressway. Same situation happens. However, the next time there are lights involved. So of course, okay, he's turned on the blue lights. Let me get my mind right. Mm-hmm. Let me pull over. I pull over, and instead of him pulling behind me, he pulls beside me. And I'm like, okay, well, this is strange. So I let my window down, and I'm fully prepared. License, registration's already ready. I know I'm not speeding. What's going on? And he goes, ma'am, you don't hear me yelling at you, trying to get you to turn your lights on. It was raining, and I didn't have my headlights on. No problem. I'm in error here. And I said, well, I don't know about yelling, but no, I didn't hear you yelling. He said, well, I could have just given you a ticket. Would you want to have that happen to you today? No, I don't. I'm going to turn my lights off. Thank you, sir. And so having exchanges like that, I could feel myself tense. I could feel myself being clenched up. I could feel my attitude. It was just starting to boil, because not only are you putting myself in jeopardy, you're putting my child in jeopardy in the way that you're driving on this expressway, trying to talk to me.
Girl, I'm getting upset hearing the story. And
and so I'm like, I'm keeping it together here, and you're trying to literally control the situation verbally first. Like, you feel like you have to get me together to help me understand that this could have possibly gotten worse. I do understand that this could have gotten worse. This could be worse than us just having this conversation. I could be outside of this car. You could have your knee on my neck, so understanding that it happens. So I understand for everyone, that emotional change, it shifts, and it can happen very quickly, because I noticed it within myself. But Shevon, to your question is, what is it that folks can do? I'd like to bring in the marriage of spirituality and mental health. Yeah. When we were growing up, Corinthians 1st chapter 15, 58, it says, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. And so when we think about the context of being steadfast and immovable, that's a mental health mindset, right? We talk about mindset all of the time. Get your mindset together. Try to be mindful, practice mindfulness. Being steadfast and immovable is exactly that. It's a powerful choice that you get to make, that you're not going to be moved by your circumstances. We're not here to ask for acceptance with anything anymore. right? We're here to be in control of ourselves. We're here to make sure that we're not being reactive to what's going on, but we're being responsive. And that comes with all of the things that we talked about, you know, just being aware, you know, being conscious of your own emotions, being mindful of what's the best decision. It's just like when we take our licensure exam. All of these answers are right, but we want you to pick the most right.
First off, I'm about to get up and praise and worship because that was a whole session.
No, I think it's,
okay, that was from the Lord himself.
listen,
Okay. He said, hold up, Stephanie, say this one thing about me, what I do.
I'm
okay?
done. I'm done. We don't have to
Throw
talk
the
about
test in it, okay?
like I'm dropping the mic.
Because that's our foundation, right? Like that's our foundation as a culture, that we've always had the spirituality. And it's not to say that we want to knock, you know, that relationship, to say, you know, I can't go with that. You know, that's our foundation. That's what encourages us to keep moving forward. But sometimes we miss being mindful of those foundational principles that help us to keep our mindset in check.
And I know for me, people ask all the time, how do you deal with everyone else's trauma and still keep a balanced mindset? And I'm like, listen, my answer is always, I have to pray. I have to pray constantly, because I know for me, during this week of, you know, making sure that other people were handling it okay, making sure that other people were coping, I told a friend of mine, I said, you know, during this time, it's so strange being a person who's a helper. I said, because you're helping people in crisis while you're in crisis at the same time. And so it's like I'm holding space for you, but I'm really kind of trying to hold space for myself at the same time. And I think that we have to be honest with ourselves that, you know, therapists don't always, we don't always have the right answers. We don't always know, you know, sometimes we're in conflict. Sometimes we, you know, you don't know what to do. And I think that it just makes sense to try to have these conversations and being open and helping people to cope. Again, something that I think is just so important is unplug. Stop scrolling, stop watching, and really just kind of, you know, focus on inward. If you need to you know, pray for your mindset, pray for your family. You know, I find during this pandemic, before this happened, but I think it makes so much, it helps now, is just being very grateful and being in just a mindset of gratitude. Because so much is happening, there's so much chaos, so much uncertainty, that in order for me to, you know, kind of keep myself at a higher vibration, I have to constantly just being grateful for the things that I have, the opportunities that I have, people around me. I'm thankful to be in my right mind. I think that we take those things for granted, but when quarantine, COVID-19, murders happening on social media, and still being able to push forward and go to work and take care of our children and, you know, interact with other people and still being in your right mind, that is something above else to be grateful for. Because like Nia mentioned, there are people who are dealing with all of this who weren't in their right mind. They were dealing with things, trauma, pain, mental distress already. And then on top of this, all of this is happening, and now they're dealing with, you know, what's happening now. And so I think you have to stay in that mindset of just being grateful and really just bringing yourself, you know, centering yourself, so you don't, because it's so easy to get overwhelmed. It's so easy to get stressed out. You really have to kind of bring yourself back. I do want to go to questions, and so we can answer any questions, so we can interact with the people, because I've been trying to like they've been messaging different things. People have been really grateful for the conversation. But if you all have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We really want to tackle some of those questions, have a intimate discussion, transparent discussion, and, you know, unpack any kind of emotions that you might have been dealing with. Yeah, Erin, you're right. Everybody is not well. And people were not well before this. And so it's before this happened, I was having a conversation with a coworker, and I said, you know, the next wave once we come out of quarantine, are people's mental health. because people have been socially isolated. People have lost their jobs. People have dealt with death and have grieved the loss of family members who they haven't even properly been able to grieve or go to their funerals. And so dealing with that is a lot. Who would have thought we'd also be dealing with this? Which is a whole different place on it. Let's see.
I think it's too with that, it's a higher calling, that we're being led to. I know for me personally and professionally, when COVID hit, my faith was tested. I was like, before that, I had my life together. Praise God, Sunday church, kids fed, bills paid. I am a true Christian. But then COVID-19 happened. I was like, in my flesh, my natural reaction.
You ready to depend on him for all your help?
Listen, okay. My natural reaction was to freak out. And then God came to me and he was like, oh no, sweetheart.
Not today. Not today.
You need 24 hours. And then that's me stretching my hand out, being real cool with you. Because we have come too far and I have put you in position. You cannot trauma bond with them. Because I wanted to trauma bond with the people who was going. I mean, I'm an empathic person. I naturally was like, and God was like, get it together because you will speak from the other side. You will guide from the other side. You cannot do that with them. Oh. And so I had to really be bigger than COVID.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Nothing but God.
I've had to really cling to my community.
Yeah.
Right. And not even just my immediate circle, but my family, my friends, my sisters, sisterhood has been so important to me during this season. I spent so much time on the phone with my grandmother, and just getting that wisdom from her. I interviewed my grandmother recently just to have a conversation, to hear from her experience and being born in 1937. Right. To hear what it was like at that time and her feeling like things haven't changed very much. They're just a lot more well documented, and so really, really trying to cling to the community, itself, and then using the energy that I feel on the inside to channel it for something positive to give to others. Because actually, that spirit of giving is good for your mental health. So if you can do something for your neighbor, it may not necessarily be your next door neighbor, of which I've seen a lot of my neighbors now that I've been in quarantine, but it's I've really, really spent a lot of my energy in service to others even more because I understand the gravity of what everybody could possibly be experiencing. So because someone has taken the time to be vulnerable with me to share that they're going through something, if I can be a resource, then I'm going to give, so that's how I've kind of channeled a lot of this experiences to cling to my community and just stay connected, and then also to make sure that I'm giving to other people because that's good for us too.
I think that trauma bonding is so important. Yeah. Because and we touched on it in our, when you all were on the Fearless podcast, and we talked about how so many people were dealing with COVID-19 and they weren't doing well. Mm-hmm. But on the other side of that, I didn't find myself not doing well during COVID-19, but I found it so hard I was almost at an impasse. I don't want to put put all of my, I'm doing fine.
I'm doing fine.
and so I was absorbing all of that. And I think it's so important not to take on other people's pain and trauma. It's okay to be okay. You don't have to take that on. And even if we put it in now into what the riots that are happening, all of the things that are on social media, I can be empathetic towards you. I can, talk to you. But I think that we get so caught up in taking on other people's stuff that is what weighs us down. That it's not, because at the end of the day, I used to find myself until I started using some proper boundaries. Because I take on other people's emotions. Mm-hmm. And I would be at home, I'm up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about your problem that you told me, and you're probably at home asleep. But I'm sitting over here okay, how are we going to figure this out? What's going on? And I had to get to a point to where I was like, Shevon, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot do that, because I found myself being drained. And I think during this time, during COVID season, during all of the riots and all of those things happening, we have to be really mindful of what's our stuff and what's other people's stuff. Like, my pain doesn't have to be your pain just for me to feel for you. And I think we have to be really mindful of that as we move through all that's happening in the world, because it's easy to be the bag lady and collect everything, because it will weigh you down. It will weigh you down.
Yeah.
So how do either one of you guys like process that piece of it? Because as I'm listening to you, Shevon, I'm thinking about, okay, so what's important for them and for us is not to feed the negative, and a lot of that is like, I know it's very tempting for us to watch something we shouldn't, or, to get into things that we may not, need to get into, and it's hard to block that. For us as helping professionals, we can't escape it, because everyone is always going to be sharing that information. So when you have an experience like trauma bonding, how do you wash that off?
I think for me personally, just getting around like-minded people and allowing God to be God, right? Not trying to look for solutions to my problem, but like really lean on the people who are speaking life rather than death over the situation. And I feel like for me, like even meeting you ladies on the podcast, and I shared with Stephanie, I said, I thought Stephanie was older, because I was like, this girl got way too much wisdom. Has to be older than what. And then I saw her picture, I was like, okay. Because I thought it was just me. Okay. Because I'm like, but
and then we're the same age, right?
And we're the same age. But that's what I was saying. Like, I feel like, I've been in situations where I've tried to dictate what things are supposed to be and how they're supposed to go. Even with COVID-19, I had to grow up really fast, but both as a woman, and 2, as a professional woman, and 3, as a mother, and all those things intertwined in a crisis. But for me, when I stopped, allowed myself, and this was, God has been working on me and being a strong Black woman for about 2 years now, so changing my mindset around not having it all together, and you still can be productive and you still can be a leader, right? So I really feel like for me, it's just been around like, Shevon, like, you're a leader by even getting us 3 on this platform, just by meeting us, doing a podcast, and our synergies coming together and us manifesting this. And now all these people have this in context from women of color, right?
Yeah.
Less than 3% of helping people in the profession. And so I feel like it's around the people, like, what are you being spirit led to, right? That feeling that you have in your body that's telling you that you could be doing more. Are you answering to that? And so that's what keeps me, in checks and balances, because it'd be so easy for me to get angry and just have an attitude to be angry. But it's another thing for me to take that anger and rise above my emotional experience. So that's what has been really keeping me grounded, is the fact that I know that it's not me, but I have to be bigger than what I'm experiencing.
And mine is just mindset. Simply just something that I've always, well, I won't say always, but something that I focused on is really trying to stay as positive as I can. I'm not saying that I walk around every day like nothing bad ever happens to me, but having the mindset that things are going to get better. Like, things are going to get better. And I know that sometimes when I say that, people are like, okay, but it hasn't. I can't dwell in that mindset. Like, right. I can't get stuck in that mindset, because when you do, then all your thoughts start becoming negative thoughts. And so I try to be really intentional about the thoughts that I have, about the things that I consume, about the people that I talk to, the books that I read. I really try to be so mindful of it, because it's so important. And then just having really good boundaries of not having, I don't want to watch every video that that comes out about it. I don't want to talk about everything all the time. And I think you have to be really selfish almost with your mental health and your wellness and your care of self. you have to be selfish and be okay with being selfish. You know, I don't want to talk about it. I have to stay in a mind frame of things are going to get better. What can I do, to your point, Nia, what can I do to get to that better? I'm going to do everything that I can.
Right.
But I'm not going to dwell on the bad things that are happening. I'm going to acknowledge them. I know that they're happening. I get angry that they're happening. But at the same time, I tell myself all the time, it's going to get better. I mean, people can come to me and tell me bad things that are happening. I'm like, yep, it sucks, but it's going to get better. And I think I was watching Transformation Church the other day, a couple Sundays ago.
Come on, Transformation.
And he and the pastor, Mike Todd, said, it's okay to have those conversations with God and to say, you know what, God, this sucks. This sucks. But I know that it's going to get better. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're going to help me get to better. And I think that we have to just be really clear with whatever it is that you believe in, whatever it is that keeps you centered, focus on that. We have to stop allowing the outside chaos to make our behavior chaotic, to make our thoughts chaotic. You know, because when that happens, then we end up with what we're dealing with now. And so before we end, I want to just make sure I'm not missing anyone's question. This has been great. I could talk literally to y'all all day. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing any questions that anyone has. We've had some amazing comments. Let's see. I don't see any questions, but I see some really good things. Oh, wait a minute. Someone just made, I guess it was just a comment, and they just said being proactive, asking yourself, what can we do before this is even a problem? And really just, you know, figuring out how do we we talked about a little bit, identifying what those triggers are and kind of just planning around those things. So if there are no questions, ladies, I have enjoyed this conversation so much. Can you let everyone know where they can find you, where they can follow you? You can go ahead, Stephanie.
So this is Stephanie. You can find me at lifestylemanagementcounseling.com. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm available in the states of Florida and Georgia. So those are where my licensing credentials are set. So anyone in those areas, my office is completely virtual at this time. And so counseling appointments are available. You can always reach out to me at sjones@lifestylemanagementcounseling.com. Or you can go directly through my website and schedule straight out, you know, so my calendar is always available in real time to be able to process that conversation or any conversation. If it is on the women empowerment side, you can find me at womenatwork.com, and that work has an E in place of the O.
And yes, so and my name is Nia Ridgle. I'm a licensed clinical therapist, also life coach. So I do two different things. I do life coaching, and I also do mental health therapy. You can go on my website at ridgleconsulting.com. I also have different social media outlets, still Ridgle Consulting. You can find me there. And on LinkedIn, I have a huge following. I'm really passionate about creating dynamic leaders that are mentally healthy and stable. A few things that I'm doing in the community right now as a support, I have a men's group that meets every Sunday called Restoring the Kings. And it's for our Black and brown men as a mental health wellness group. We teach emotional regulation and mental and emotional intelligence. So if you are a Black and brown man and you're over the age of 18 and you're looking for a support group, especially during this time, please, it's free of charge. We meet every Sunday, 6:30 Pacific Standard Time. I would love to have you. If you are a leader, a woman who's looking for some support, please reach out to me at my website at Ridgle Consulting. I do a lot of coaching and leadership therapy with women.
And this platform is the Mental Wellness Collective, which is an online community designed to help women prioritize their mental health. This is our Facebook page where we're meeting on for the Facebook Live, but also on Instagram. It's at the Mental Wellness Collective. I post a lot of just content to help you really just normalizing the conversations around mental health. Really just help you to cope, identifying things that may be wrong, maybe you're out of alignment, to help you balance, prioritize, strategize, to get you to a point of balance and wellness. You can also go to www.mentalwellnesscollective.com. I also have a podcast, which is called the Tribe of Helpers podcast. And the podcast is really designed to bring helpers in the mental wellness, mental health profession, leaders, thought leaders, mental health experts, advocates, to really have conversations around mental health and to normalize it. Because I'm so passionate about normalizing the conversation around mental health for African Americans. You know, it's something that we don't talk about often. It's something that needs to be talked about. And so the collective is definitely for all women, but specifically for women of color. The podcast is definitely, I've brought on lots of women of color in a variety of different backgrounds, to just to talk about things, depression, anxiety, motivating your mindset. We just finished out our Quarantine and Heal 5-week series, so where we had just different guests coming on to help you to deal with your mental health while in quarantine. So I invite you to follow the Mental Wellness Collective, follow Nia and Stephanie. But I am so grateful for you all joining in and having this conversation with me, because it was definitely something that was needed and so important. So thank you all.
Thank you for having me.
Having us. Thank you.
You are more than welcome. Thank you. We're not live anymore.
Okay, great.
That was great,
Great.
guys. Thank you.